Connecticut East This Week is supported by CT Examiner, a multi-award-winning online newspaper covering stories from across the state, from politics to business, health, education, and the arts. For just a $20 annual subscription, CT Examiner will let you know what's happening where you live. ctexaminer.com, reporting and supporting what matters. Farmland in Connecticut is disappearing, and once it's gone for good. We talk to local farmers and a land trust about their concerns and what can be done to protect farmland for the future. Plus, we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. Connecticut is a small state, and although it has plenty of land, only so much is available or usable for things like farming or developing. Between 1977 and 2002, the state lost over 12% of its farmland, a rate back then that was faster than any other state at the time. And once farmland is gone, it's gone for good. And with Connecticut's aging farming population, with family members selling off land to developers at increasingly higher prices, the situation is ringing alarm bells with younger local farmers and land trusts who are trying to compete with developers to stop farmland from disappearing in the state. I caught up with some local farmers and a land trust recently to talk about their concerns. Joining us on the podcast is Elizabeth Moore, Executive Director of the Connecticut Farmland Trust, Kevin Blacker, who is a farmer in Connecticut, Bridget Poper, also a farmer for Raptor Ridge Farm in Lebanon, Matt Stebner, who's the president of the New London County Farm Bureau, but also a part-time farmer as well with property in Glastonbury. To you all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for having us, Brian.
So we're talking about farmland that is disappearing here in the state of Connecticut. Clearly, it is not unique to this state. It is happening everywhere. Elizabeth, I want to turn to you first because you are part of an organization which does amazing work. It helps to preserve and has been doing, I believe, since 2002, preserving farmland. Just tell us a little bit about the Connecticut Farmland Trust.
We're a nonprofit. We focus exclusively on the preservation of farmland across the state. We're the only group that does this. And what we do is we work with farmland owners. They may also be the farmers, to create a plan for permanently protecting their land and execute it with them. Or we then may also refer them to the Connecticut Department of Agriculture if that would be more appropriate.
Kevin, I want to pick up with you. You and I have spoken on many an occasion on various subjects. We did an article recently which prompted this podcast about disappearing farmland in Connecticut. What are your concerns and worries, obviously, as a farmer?
Well, as it relates to farmland, loss of farmland, conversion into housing, commercial development. I don't really like to see good farmland put under solar. When farmland's put into housing, it doesn't come back. And then for people like the farmers on this podcast, that means, we're not going to have access to it. The next generation isn't going to have access to it. And it just makes it harder. Protecting farmland is a big concern.
Matt, turning to you, you're a part-time farmer. You said that you recently purchased some land in Glastonbury, a lovely part of the state of Connecticut. Just talk us through why you decided to do that. And was it complex?
My wife and I are growing our cut flower business. She farms full-time with her family. And it was complex. It was a private deal between a landowner, the landowner's attorney, and my attorney. It was a private sale without a real estate agent. So it was a basic drawn up, but it took us about 6 months to get everything ironed out.
I won't press you on the figure because that can be a little bit personal. But I mean, farmland does sell at a cheaper rate if it's sold as farmland than if it's sold for development. I mean, was price a factor for you when you were even considering this, i.e. it had to be a good deal?
No, because it was a special parcel that the landowner needed to unload due to needing to unload the family estate. So we paid him market rate of what was a fair comparable value for the area.
And when you say a special parcel, what was it, shielded from development? Can you just elaborate a little bit more on that?
It's literally like a town green. It's in the corner of a bunch of roads, so it can only be used for farming or used for open space. It was privately owned, and the landowner, the town doesn't allow building on it, development on it. So that kind of mitigates the price down a little bit. But we did pay what was a fair price for Glastonbury, even Glastonbury open space land.
And Bridget, talk to us about Raptor Ridge Farm, because again, you're a farmer. There's challenges there. I know there's certain things that you do at that particular farm to help preserve what it is that you've got.
So here at Raptor Ridge, we actually focus on clearing invasive species using our goats. And then after our goats go and clear it, we reseed with low maintenance native pollinator friendly plants. For us, restoring land is one way to keep farmland usable.
And how much of a challenge do you find this being a farmer? And also, have you had the opportunity possibly to purchase other farmland? Because part of the issue here is that some of the legacy farms, the relatives, family of those farmers may not wish to carry on with the farm. And that's part of the reason how we see these farms disappearing.
Yeah, exactly. And we have been trying to actually find farmland for us because right now we are only on 4 acres and we are wanting to buy more. And it is very difficult to find something usable and affordable.
I was going to say price must be like the factor. Although I understand Lebanon, Windham County, New London County, and I'm happy to be corrected here. I understand that those are parts of the state along, I believe, with Litchfield, which have some of the most protected pieces of land in Connecticut. But as you said, it's still a price factor, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Elizabeth, talk to us a little bit more about your organization and the things that you can help to do. I know that the Department of Agriculture has also set itself quite lofty parameters to preserve land, and it does very well. And I think in 2024, it had one of its best years at actually preserving farms and land. But still, this land is disappearing. And as Kevin said, once it's gone, it can't be brought back, can it? Because once you get development on there, nobody's going to like knock that down and put it back into pasture, are they?
No, once it's gone, it's gone. There are even situations where a developer buys a piece of land with exquisite soils and actually strips the soils and sells them. And so even if those houses were to be torn down, what we are all focused on protecting would be gone. So we're up against development, basically, is that developers are better funded than we are. We have the most expensive land in the country. Farmland is the most expensive. I think we're second after Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And even protected farmland can also go for a pretty penny. And that's one of the things that we're looking to address, because just because a piece of farmland is protected doesn't mean that it will be affordable to a farmer. Affordability is a very big issue, as Bridget, Matt, and Kevin can talk about. And there's a very good program through the Department of Agriculture called Farmland. I call it Match.com for farmers and land because it's obvious what it is. And there are more than 8 times the number of farmers looking for land than there is land available. And those of us doing this, we really believe the land is out there. It's just a question of getting those landowners, those farm owners listing their land. But at this point, farmers want to buy land. They're not looking to lease. And so there's a real shortage of listings for sale of land versus leasing.
It's about the fact you're after a piece of land in Ledgard. It's a fairly sizable parcel. We spoke to you previously about it. You've got concerns that you probably can afford it, but the only way you're going to be able to afford it is basically to sell the development rights to an organization to make sure that it can't be developed on. Is that correct?
Yes, sale of development rights is definitely going to be a piece of being able to afford this piece of land. I want to touch on something that Elizabeth said, which is that we're up against development. We've always been up against development. What has changed recently is that we're now also up against, I don't know how to say it other than the wealthy. We're up against the wealthy that are purchasing farms basically as estates. I could list 6 off the top of my head, farms that are in the Farmland Preservation Program that are purchased and then used as an estate by very wealthy individuals.
So just to
Connecticut
clarify, hang on, Kevin. So
Yeah,
just to clarify, when
yeah.
you say an estate, and we're not going to name anybody because it's not a naming and shaming exercise here, but this is when you say an estate, are you saying that it then becomes private? So the access to that land is cut off from the public and it's no longer agricultural land? Just be clear what you're saying when you say an
But
estate.
when I say an estate, I mean you buy a working dairy farm was protected and it has prime and important farmland soils with not a stone in it. It is purchased at a grossly inflated price, by somebody that's a millionaire or more. They take the barn and they put $40,000 staircases and put a basketball court in and swimming pools and they're using it as an estate and it's not being actively farmed. Elizabeth and the Connecticut Farmland Trust have a fascinating program, which two of her colleagues were down in Ledger discussing with my sister, my wife, and I. And it hasn't been done in the state. New London County Farm Bureau had a lot of interest in it previously, and I'm very, very excited to hear that they're pursuing this. It's like a purchase at ag value, and Elizabeth would know better, but it's basically an additional easement that is placed requiring the land to be farmed by a farmer. And it would add to the affordability. To Bridget's point of the difficulty of accessing that her and her husband are facing in trying to access farmland. I'm 39 years old. It's been 25 years that I've looked to buy farmland and tried, I mean, daily, like searching Williams Ravis listings, FarmLink, beating the bushes. I finally have an opportunity to purchase a piece of land. I have it under deposit, but it's going to require sale of development rights in order to be able to buy it. And that, unfortunately, is a somewhat slow process.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second here, and maybe Matt may want to answer this question, or Bridget, any of you. But we've not actually mentioned the figure for an acre of farmland, but I believe it flows around the 12, maybe $14,000 per acre mark. Developers obviously have got very deep pockets, can often come in at 2, 3, 4 times that amount if they want a piece of land. Matt, is that what you're seeing? Because, when you've got legacy farmers whose families decide this isn't what I want to do, if somebody rocks up with 3 or 4 times the acreage value of normal agricultural land, you can't really blame them if they want to sell it, can you?
People are entitled to their own private property rights in the state of Connecticut. You are true that the prices are. Sometimes, unfortunately, it is families need to sell due to medical debt or due to the 3Ds, divorce and dissolution and death. Estate taxes are, luckily we've gotten some work on the estate taxes, but medical debt right now is by far the most crippling. And a lot of farmers, smaller farmers, lack proper health care, and that gets tacked on. And so that's usually a driving factor. A lot of people would love to see their farm saved, but sometimes they need to go for the best dollar just to make sure that everybody's whole before they pass away.
We're also up against, of course, here, and again, this isn't unique to Connecticut, but the desire to build more housing. And although there does seem to be a little bit of a trend to move towards building within sort of like towns and cities, so it's transport driven, there is still a desire to build elsewhere. Brownfield sites get eaten up, etc. I mean, Elizabeth, perhaps you can talk a little bit to that. I don't want to take you out your comfort zone, but I'm sure you're well aware of the situation. Housing is needed in the state and it has to go somewhere.
No, you're not out of my comfort zone because I have a master's in urban planning. So you are right up my alley. This is a problem of zoning. We do not have planning in this state. We have 169 fiefdoms. There is no collaboration. We have counties in name only. So towns are competing with each other for commercial development, industrial development because of the taxes. And this is very definitely a zoning issue. Zoning, the biggest threat to farmland in the country is rural sprawl, where 5 and 10 acre lots are just getting cut off. They're very easy to develop. You've got the road frontage. You don't have to put in a road. And that is the biggest threat to farmland. And the lot sizes should be smaller. There should be that you can't develop beyond an area where there is not, public water and sewer, for example. That's going to keep the development focused in one area. But the zoning is a huge problem. And I was talking with somebody about this the other day. This is what we face. This is impacting quality of life. It's impacting the loss of farmland, open space, habitat. It's zoning is the issue. And that gets into affordable housing too. That gets into properties being able to have another unit on it, which I think we have here in New Haven, because I saw that two people have converted garages. So, but that's a must.
Is this also, I mean, and I hear you obviously about that, and as you say, that is a big, huge aspect of it. The state, when the Department of Agriculture steps in and buy things, like we said earlier at the top of this conversation, they've got lofty goals, but even they've only got so much money to be able to buy things. Money obviously speaks. I mean, if you had bigger pots of money at the Connecticut Farmland Trust, obviously, could you do more?
Oh, yeah. This all comes down to money. And government is in a better position just because of, we go to private donors and government goes to the taxpayers. And so I am thrilled that my tax dollars go for farmland preservation. Yes, it all comes down to funding. And, anybody who is in the conservation field, let alone other entities that receive funding from the federal government for different programs, are very definitely impacted. Farmers are impacted straight across the board. And also the amount of funding that's available for conservation is been slashed.
I want to leave you all with this final question. All of you who do have property, hoping to get property, and obviously Elizabeth as an organization which is helping to preserve our farmland, what would be the one thing that you would like to see happen, maybe at the legislature or whatever, that you feel would make an actual impact in making this situation better? Bridget, do you want to have a crack at that?
Yeah, so kind of what everybody else touched on, we're very much pro smart siting. So we need housing, but we also need food, flood buffers, and open soils. I think the sweet spot is really building where it makes sense and keeping prime soil and flood mitigation landscape working.
Yeah, I can agree with Bridget because if you need to do flood planning, which I know is a big issue in Northern County right now, farmland is the best way to absorb your floodplains. I mean, the river swells. Yeah, it affects fields, but they're just fields. And the rivers have been flooding for generations. In terms of ways that the legislature can impact it, I think it can be done through some very creative legislative. Not only the stuff, I applaud what the Connecticut Farmland Trust is working on. I applaud what Department of Ag through their Farmland Preservation Board is working on with the OPAV and all that stuff. They're thinking outside the box. I think it's going to take some of that. I think another thing that we should be looking at for farmland and access to farmland and stuff like that is using brownfields, using old urban areas that the buildings have fallen down, and there's a lot of urban farms and there's a lot of urban farming coming up. And I think that's another way that that's going to be into the future to be able to feed people. And it's going to bring the communities, because you have a lot of people in a really tight spot, and it's going to bring a lot of people to know their farmers, know their food, which is what we need. And you'll be taking care of your local area.
Kevin.
Let's see. Excellent answer by Bridget. Just extremely concise, well communicated, just excellent answer. Want to say how grateful I am for the Connecticut Farmland Trust. And while I have the chance, make a plug for the New London County Farm Bureau. That organization has had more impact on my life and caused more personal growth than I think anything I've ever been a part of. So I want to express that gratitude. If the legislature wants to do something, if there's one action that could be done, it would be to apply political pressure and replace the commissioner of the Department of Agriculture. We need somebody with farm experience, with real farm experience. Brian Hurlbert, somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, lacks that. We need somebody that really has the experience and the aggression to cause change and act quickly.
And last word to you, Elizabeth.
Several things. This is incredibly lofty, but I would love to see a statewide Department of Planning. I think that would make but that's incredibly lofty. I'm 100% with Matt. I think that brownfields in urban centers can be used for greenhouses and hydroponics. And I think that's very critical. And also, there was a very important land access bill that was passed in the last legislative session, and making sure that that gets the funding that it needs, and not only for staff, but also to implement it and to make sure that that funding continues. It's not 1 year.
It's been great talking to you all. It's just the beginning of a conversation which we all know needs to be ongoing to make sure that people continue to hear it. But in the meantime, Elizabeth Moore, Kevin Blacker, Bridget Poper and Matt Stebner, thank you ever so much for giving us your expert opinion and views and for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.
And if you're interested in the work of the Connecticut Farmland Trust, or you're a family member or farmer interested in farmland, then visit their website at ctfarmland.org.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on and know we'll get through this. Mom, we are so high up. Hold my hand.
No, you hold my hand.
Here we go.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week, supported by ctexaminer.com, reporting and supporting what matters. The local elections came and went on November 4th, and Democrats made gains across the state. Early voting in the state saw Democrats outpace both Republican and unaffiliated voters in the lead-up to Election Day, according to the Secretary of the State's office. In Norwich, Democrat City Councilman Singh Swanjit took the top job as mayor of the city, making him the first Sikh to hold a top job in Connecticut. Incumbent Republican Mayor of Norwich, Peter Nystrom, was unable to run again for mayor due to term limits. And in Middletown, Democrat Jean Nacera, who was appointed mayor after the resignation of Ben Florsheim earlier this year, was given a full term by voters by a wide margin against his Republican challenger. Stonington elected unaffiliated but Democrat-endorsed Bill Middleton as their first selectman, beating his Republican challenger, and he replaces Daniel Cheeseborough, the former first selectman who did not run for re-election. In Groton, Jill Rusk, a town councillor, became the city's new mayor against her challenger, Gwen Depot, the city's deputy mayor. Rusk will serve as the city's newest mayor in 8 years after incumbent Mayor Keith Hedrick did not seek re-election. You can find the results of the election in your town and city by visiting the office of the Secretary of the State's website and clicking on the results section at portal.ct.gov/SOTS. Residents of 5 properties in the City of New London are forming a union to stop their new landlord from evicting them from their homes. Alpha Capital Funds, headquartered in Shelton, Connecticut, recently acquired the properties and have started issuing quit notices, which is the beginning process to evict tenants. Michael Duffy has lived at Redden Avenue in the City of New London for the past 8 years and has received his quit notice.
I'm on Social Security, so I'm on disability. I get $967 a month, and my rent is $950. So now I have to choose between paying my rent and struggling to pay my bills. And that's a lot of people in the building because everything's going up in prices, food's going up, electricity's going up, and it's like, what do you do? We just want fair rent for all of us in the building.
Luca Milanakis is the vice president of the Connecticut Tenants Union, an organization helping tenants around the state with stable, community-controlled housing.
At least 14, potentially more, tenants who received a no-fault, quote-unquote, lapse of time notice to quit last week with Alpha Capital trying to kick out individuals and families for no fault of their own. They are on time with rent, they are abiding by their lease, and yet this new landlord wants to come in and clear out long-standing tenants for no justified reason other than trying to make more of a profit than he can already make at the rents as they are.
Connecticut doesn't have statewide rent control laws and failed to pass a bill in 2024 that would have stopped landlords from evicting tenants when their lease ended. In a statement, Alpha Capital said they are complying with all relevant Connecticut housing laws and are permitted to take back possession of an apartment at the expiration of a lease term. Connecticut immigrant rights groups want certain issues addressed in a special legislative session. Edwin J. Vieira of the Public News Service has this report.
The session is intended to consider using state funds to backfill cuts made to social programs by the Trump administration. However, the state has been ground zero for immigration raids, worrying immigrant residents who are demanding action. Tabitha Sukdea with Connecticut Students for a Dream says groups such as hers want lawmakers to address certain issues the immigrant community faces.
Immigrant data is protected. The private resources of states are not used for federal purposes. We have a mandate also to make sure funding is maintained for the current existing Husky program for undocumented young people and also for pregnant people.
Another ask is for a federal response fund using part of the state's multi-billion-dollar surplus to meet these commitments, but it's much harder due to the ongoing government shutdown. While the Trump administration announced it'll partially fund SNAP benefits for November, states are left to dip into their own coffers to ensure residents receive their benefits. The special session will be held on November 12th and 13th. I'm Edwin J. Vieira.
Healthcare system Yale New Haven Health is letting 4 top executives go, leaving Greenwich Hospital, which is part of the healthcare system, with a leadership void at the top with no chief operating officer. Mark Cossack, the current COO, is leaving, along with Bill Degnan, Greenwich Hospital's chief financial officer. And in a letter to staff dated October 29th, Christopher O'Connor, Yale Health's chief executive, announced that Bill Asseltine, who is the senior vice president and general counsel at Yale New Haven Health, is leaving after 19 years, and Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer Gail Kostler is also departing, leaving O'Connor to pick up her role pro tem while they search for a new CFO. The healthcare system has been hemorrhaging cash and staff over the past few years, even before COVID-19 took hold. Yale Health has also seen a decline in the number of patients treated, as well as patients coming to their hospitals and facilities, which affected financial forecasts for the healthcare system. Yale Health started the 2025 financial year with operating losses of $61.9 million against a budgeted forecast loss of $5.4 million. A spokesperson for the Yale New Haven Health System confirmed they are making executive transitions as part of their ongoing efforts to transform the health system, but gave no specifics as to why the 4 individuals in particular are leaving. And in the CT Examiner this week, Francisco Uranga reports on the departure of Joshua Campbell Torrance, the executive director of the Florence Griswold Museum. Torrance will depart November 26th and will be succeeded in the interim by Peter Steer, the museum's director of administration. When Torrance was hired in February 2023, the museum was in the midst of planning a major expansion. That proposal was recalibrated, reducing the square footage to what he described as a reasonable physical expansion, with greater emphasis on renovating existing buildings rather than adding new space. Steer, who is a Madison resident, comes from the healthcare industry. He worked for more than 20 years at Yale Health, where he retired as a chief operating officer. Steer said one reason it made sense for him to serve as interim director for the next few months was that the institution was entering a period of construction and renovation. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.